Just as I start recording or streaming, I get this little alert both in Zoom and in YouTube Studio that my internet connection is unstable.
Ah, no
So
kidding.
it might be one of those. It might be one of those streams. Hello, welcome to Three Skulls Tavern. I'm Matt, your host, and I'm joined by Eric and Harry, two of the players from the Forbidden Land stream, to talk about our episode, our latest episode. As I've just said, apologies if we get cut off. Hopefully, we'll be okay. But it is what it is. So,
Yep.
yep. Um, cool. So, if you haven't watched episode 6 yet, please, I hope you're not watching this because there are going to be some pretty major, spoilers going on.
Yeah, it's gonna
Hey,
happen.
Tony.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, if you've got any questions about the episode as well, just let them loose in the comments in the live chat, and we'll pick them up when we get a lull in the current topic. The first thing I wanted to start off discussing, though, is the prep that I did, because that's kind of how I like to start all of my tavern talks. The prep for this was pretty straightforward. We had a pretty clear idea of where the party were headed at the end of the last episode, when they had met this elf who came to their camp and beseeched them to, effectively head off to this orc settlement. Which happens to be an adventure site in the Raven's Purge campaign book. So this is basically the point where we are no longer playing in a sandbox. We're still playing in a sandbox, but we're now officially going after the official campaign, or we're starting the official campaign. Whether the players want to keep pursuing it from there is completely up to them. This is extremely open-ended, so you can pretty much wander on and off the path as you see fit. Kind of like, imagine it like a Grand Theft Auto game, kind of, where you've got like clues to go to another point in the campaign, but you can also just keep playing around in the big sandbox. Hey, Fenhorn. So yeah, that's where we left it. So for my prep, I was basically just thinking, okay, I need to get them to this adventure site. There's quite a lot to do in this adventure site as well, or there could be, depending on how you approach it. And because I know we're limited to 2-hour segments, I specifically ignored random events. So we had no random events. I think. Let me just double check that. I'm pretty sure I didn't do that. I'm just going to double check my notes. Yeah, no. Yeah. So what I wrote in my notes was that we would have no random encounters on the way to this adventure site. But I did want to have one more instance of the fox following them. So the players still rolled. They still did all the usual survival things. But because I wanted to get them to the adventure site and get started on that, with our time limitations, I effectively didn't add any extra encounters. Didn't even roll for them. But I kept the fox going, so the fox is this kind of ongoing little thing going in the background, but didn't actually have the fox interact with them because I didn't want them going off on a tangent. So that was my prep in terms of rolling for random encounters. The only other thing to do then was to really familiarize myself with the adventure site, which meant reading the chapter in Raven's Purge quite a few times, taking notes. I have a OneNote document, so I basically created a separate page in my OneNote notebook for each of the locations within this adventure site. So I have something like 15 pages. Let me just count them very quickly. 9. So for each of the numbered, I'm not gonna talk about them in detail because obviously 2 of my players are here. I don't want them to have some sort of a surprise. But basically, there are 9 numbered locations within this adventure site. So each of those numbered locations has a separate page in OneNote where I've basically taken screenshots of the various bits from the book, stuck them in, so it's kind of easy to see on one page when I have it full screen on my monitor. I also have the intro information for the adventure site is on a separate page. A little bit about the Red Runners, who I can talk a little bit about because the players have already encountered them. So there's a little bit to do with them around this location. So they've had their own page. And then the final thing is just a map, the GM's map, which has all of the numbered locations on it. And that's important because the map is I brought the map into Gtove, our virtual tabletop. and I wanted the that map is a player-facing map, so it doesn't have numbered locations on it. But I needed to know where those things were. So the other thing I did in Gtove was for each of the numbered locations, I added a GM a note to each of those numbered locations in Gtove, but only visible to me as the GM. And the note is effectively the little intro paragraph for each named location is usually like 2 or 3 sentences. And I basically copied and pasted that out of the PDF into like a little note template, and that just flashes up as a little note. So when I'm actually looking at the map in Gtove, I have a little prompt telling me what each location is, even though it's the player's map, and that's actually quite useful. It will be quite useful because we haven't actually got to any numbered locations yet. Yeah. So that was basically it. And then I was basically reading through, so getting all that ready, getting the adventure site completely ready in OneNote, getting Gtove ready for it as well. And then after kind of familiarizing myself with the whole thing, it was then going and looking at how I thought the players would be approaching the adventure site as well. They had a like a clue, they had a direction to be going with, but of course they could do something else if they wanted. So that was the second part, was really getting my head around the puzzle and how that was going to work. It took a lot longer than I thought it was going to take. We'll talk about that as well today. But that's basically it for my prep. So the Red Runners. I spent a lot of time looking at the Red Runners, thinking about the Red Runners, thinking about the relationship between them, the little hooks and things about them, and trying to make sure that the main players in it, which is the leader, the elf woman with the kind of tree-like skin, the Ent, and the kind of the reckless, hot-blooded elf who wants to fight everyone. Those are kind of the three main Ren Runners I wanted to try and, if possible, introduce within the session, and they all got a little bit of time. So, yeah. I felt like my prep was pretty focused, but I didn't feel like anything went wasted. Even though we didn't get into the main, mainly the main bits of the adventure sites, I've prepped them already. So now for my future prep for our ongoing sessions, assuming you don't leave the adventure site, are not going to be wasted. So that was prep.
I don't think Lyria's going to let us leave, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, probably
I think
not.
we're as stuck as we're gonna get.
I mean, I think that's a lot.
A lot of what? Prep?
Yeah.
I think for me, it's...
I mean, it sounds like super useful, right? Like everything you did. But yeah.
My issue more is that when I'm looking at adventure sites that are spread over about a dozen pages, I actually, this is a criticism I have of the Forbidden Lands books, is that the adventure sites aren't super usable. They're not laid out in a way that's super usable at the table. There's a lot of flicking back and forth between things. You have to flick to the right numbered location to see what it says. Then if you find a named NPC there, they're at the back. There are events right at the back of the adventure site as well that actually can tie in at other places as well. And it's, for me,
seems inconvenient.
For me, it's not easy to reference, and I don't want to be flicking through PDFs back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So yeah, for me, it makes sense. I could either take my own notes, but I also like to have the text there if I want to reference it. So for me, it's just a case of doing screenshots of all the various bits and placing them on one page in OneNote means that I've got them all kind of like a scrapbook. Like I've cut them out I cut the book out basically and glued them on in a way that it's kind of like I've got my own spread for each named location. So it was a lot of work. Probably was it was probably 2 or 3 hours of work actually, just for one adventure site. Plus reading it all and all the rest of it.
So we'd better behave.
I've only used used 2 adventure sites like straight out of it, and those were Bitter Reach ones. And like I had a similar experience where I wasn't sure the best way to handle. One of them was pretty short, so it wasn't really a problem. Another one is like the sort of main settlement, right? So I'm referencing that. Recently, I went to do another sort of adventure site. I looked at it. I was like, oh, there's really cool stuff in here. I'm not going to do all this. Like, there's no way. So, like, I just used it for inspiration, like, grabbed bits and pieces, like, redrew my own thing and ran it that way. So, yeah, that's...
Yeah. I think
off,
this is one of those things that if you had a virtual tabletop like Foundry, for example, there's been a lot of talk about Foundry for Warhammer 4th Edition, and they've got an official module now, and you can buy like official modules for their official adventures and stuff, and it comes with all the NPCs like preloaded into the tabletop and stuff. I could see that being really useful, also for something like Forbidden Lands here with Raven's Purge, where you could theoretically buy a pack of the Raven's Purge official pack, and just like drop, maybe there's like a selection on the side to say like, okay, here's one of the official adventure sites. I'm going to drop it here on the map. And then when you click on that or go into it, it brings up the maps. They're all keyed for the GM, hidden information, all the NPCs relating to it. You can click on events and stuff, and it's all already loaded there. That would be, I could see that being really useful for this game. Whether that's going to happen, I know that there's been talks about bringing Forbidden Lands officially into into the Foundry, mainly because I know Martin Taikaichi. Not sure how you pronounce his surname. Sorry, I just know there's Martin on our forums. He works for for Free League, and he's a massive Foundry fan. So I have a feeling he's the inroads to getting Foundry support.
Yeah.
But anyway, we don't have that. So at the moment, it's a case of putting it all in yourself and doing it that way. Got hay on me, or straw from rabbits. Yeah. Anyway, so it is a lot of prep. I know people probably wouldn't do that much prep. If you're sitting at a table with your friends and you've read through it, you've taken some notes on a piece of paper, and then just need to reference back and forth if you need to in the book, that's fine. I've run adventure sites previously when I've run this game at the face to face, and I remember it being like that. I remember it being me having to flick through to find some specific bits because I hadn't put all the notes down that I wanted. And that's why I remembered now reading through it, like, okay, I need to get this in a way that I can reference it quickly because we have a limited amount of time, and I don't want to be wasting it by flicking through the book. So, anyway.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing as you go into digital. Like, there's some things that become easier, some things get harder, especially that sort of flipping through becomes, it's a different dynamic.
And I think I'm a bit more aware of it now, having on the Mud and Blood podcast, we've been reviewing some of the OSR titles lately, and Merkborg, for example, at the back of Merkborg there is there's like a dungeon crawl, and that's been laid out in an extremely easy to use way for literally each page is a different room in the dungeon with everything you need to know about that thing on that page, and all the intro stuff is at the front in the intro. And there's no other extra pages. It's basically, here's the introduction to getting you into it and what you need to know about this adventure site or this dungeon. And then literally every page is then a separate room with all the information you need on it. And for me, that would probably be, I would prefer that. I'd rather have a full page or even a 2-page spread for each numbered location and all the information I need to know about that on there. And maybe a summary at the front telling me here's what's going to be happening. Here's a timeline of events. But all the bits and pieces that you need to know are there. So,
anyway. The one that you did for the Halloween on Mud and Blood, Bloat, that Greg wrote, that's just one spread.
One page.
Everything's on there. Yeah, it's amazing.
I mean, that's easier to do here as well, I think, because in Forbidden Lands, if you had a smaller adventure site, in fact, Fenhorn mentions that the format works a bit better for smaller adventure sites or zones like zone sectors and things like Mutant Year Zero. But it hasn't ported across very well, I feel, in Forbidden Lands. But anyway, I mean, it is what it is. That's how we've got it. They're very good adventure sites. I really like them. I like how everything about them. It's just the layout. I'm not such a big fan of, as a GM having to actually use it at the table. So anyway, that's why I've had to spend 2 to 3 hours of prep time just in porting it over in a format that I am comfortable to use at the table. Which I don't resent it necessarily, but it's kind of like it could be better. It could be laid out in a more friendly way for a GM.
What you mean? You mean to say that it wouldn't take much more extra work for them to make it painless for you?
It would take extra work, but there is a way. There is a way to present them. For example, the way it works is you have an introduction to the adventure site spread across however many pages is needed. That has the legend. It has hooks to get you into it. Little
No
introductions.
appendices.
No, just basically those kind of bits. So the kind of introductory bit that you need to know about the adventure site. Then it launches into. Then it shows you a map, and then it shows you the on the map are numbered locations, and then it jumps straight into those numbered locations. For each numbered location, it gives you a little intro of text about it, like a descriptive bit of text that you could read aloud if you wanted to. It tells you about what happens in that numbered bit, and that's usually between 1 and 3 or 4 paragraphs. And then it gives you a very small stat block of anyone that's of any non-named NPCs that are in there. And again, those small stat blocks could be more useful because they don't actually have stats for things like weapons and stuff on them, even in shorthand. So it's literally just like and talents. Like it might list talents for some of them, but you have to go and look them up. So that all of this is like stuff that isn't necessarily useful to a GM. Like even for me, if I'm looking at it, I've got like, okay, there's going to be this NPC at this location. It says he has these 3 talents or this 1 talent at rank 2. I've got to go to a different book. I have to go to the player's handbook from Forbidden Lands. I got to leave Raven's Purge. I've got to go to the talent section. I've got to look up the talent to see what how the talent works. If I'm not familiar, if I don't have it memorized. So it's a lot. There's a lot of flicking back and forth also between books for this sort of thing. Then that basically one numbered location after the other is presented in that section of the book. Then you have after that, I think it's after that is then the people, the named NPCs are all put. I'm not sure if there's an order behind it, whether it's alphabetical or tied to the. It might even be tied to the number locations. I'm not sure. Anyway, they're all put one after the other, and they basically have a description about them, their motivations, like a little bit of background, and then their stat block as well. Their stat block again doesn't have things like detail of talents or equipment and that sort of thing. And then after that, you have events that happen. And that's kind of like the main bit. Like these events are really important to the adventure site, and in my opinion, should be at the front. You should have like a little timeline of events, of things that are going to happen at certain points when you get in there. And then, in my opinion, most of those events are tied to locations, and they should probably be in those locations. So my suggestion would be, if I was doing it, is I would reshuffle that information around, and potentially increase the page count as well. So I had a focus on usability, and I would have every numbered location would have at least 1 full page spread, or at least have all the information visible on 1 single page. So you can literally just have the book open and it's all there in front of you. And then when they go to another numbered location, you flick to where that is in the book, and there it is. And I've lots of games do that for like looking at dungeon design. That's a very common thing now is having that. But yeah. Anyway, I'll stop harping on about it. It is what it is. That was my prep for this session. Yeah. So let's talk about the puzzle. Let's talk about the puzzle. Because I didn't see that taking as long as it took. I was very tempted to, give you. I mean, we even talked about having a bit of Deus Ex Machina help there. Kind of joking around about it, but I didn't actually have someone come and solve the puzzle for you. I had someone come and kind of mock you about it, and also give you a little clue. Like the clue was that you were thinking too much about it, and like just get on with it, just try something rather than talking around how you wanted to try and do it. But yeah, that took a long time. What are your thoughts on the puzzle?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I didn't feel in the moment that, I mean, yeah, oftentimes these things are like, when you look back on it, you're like, oh, well, that was obvious. In the moment, like, yeah, it wasn't clear which details were the most pertinent ones, which is fine. Like, it's not supposed to be necessarily in a puzzle. Yeah. I mean, I like the way it all played out. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think so too. I think for me, the main issue was that we have a 2-hour slot, right?
Yeah.
And it was mainly a puzzle solving episode, which is fine.
But I hope, yeah. I mean, but I hope like watching us fail horribly at doing this was entertaining for people. And at least in our flailing around, that was fun to watch. So, and maybe it was. I mean, people seem to be engaged in the moment, laughing at us. So that's good.
I thought that we were very rationally going through every option that we could think of.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
think we were flailing. I thought we were handling it really well. And
Yeah.
like we took the information we had and we applied it in ways that made sense.
Yeah. I don't think it was that big of a deal. My issue was that I was also watching the chat, right? And people in the chat I could see were getting a little bit impatient and were starting to give you like hints and clues and stuff about it. And I was kind of like, "Come on, I want them to figure it out on their own. I don't want some third party watching basically solving it for you." Because most people have, like, a lot of the people watching at the time had access to Raven's Purge or actually run the session or prepping the session themselves. So it's kind of interesting to see that where there were people in the chat who were kind of like trying to help you along.
I'm sure it's a very easy puzzle to solve if you've already read the solution.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, obviously.
And I think that also, like, there's an element to which, like, you're approaching it as the character too, and sort of the events leading up to it, and what I'm thinking, Arlic is thinking in the moment is sort of also affecting how I'm approaching it. So I'm not necessarily thinking about the puzzle as a puzzle in itself. You know what I mean? Like, if that makes any sense. Like, I'm kind of imagining Arlic's response to it in the moment, and it was pretty much just frustration, right?
You can't really think about something abstractly in a role-playing game without fully taking yourself out of the role-playing.
Right.
Exactly. And I think
Like,
that's the thing is...
If I were playing a puzzle platformer video game, then
Yeah.
I would be thinking about puzzles and puzzle solving.
Yeah.
And I would still end up trying several variations on what I thought might have been a solution.
Yep. And I think the whole thing is made a little bit interesting in that we are live streaming, right? I don't think it would have been as noticeable if there wasn't a live audience kind of commenting along the way or having their own ideas, because it's one thing where you've got a group of people around a table trying to solve a puzzle, getting stuck, going down, getting the wrong idea and pursuing that. And then you have other people, even if it's like a puzzle that nobody knows the answer to, you have more people solving it, right? And you're gonna kind of get to the end solution a lot quicker. And that was kind of what was happening. Is we saw that in the chat that people had kind of known what to do. Were kind of saying like, just do this, just do this, just do this. Like, come on, like, isn't it obvious? A little bit. And
no, I think what Fenhorn's saying right now is absolutely right, in that if you have 4 people, you have 4 times the number of red herrings that they're inventing on their own. And then that can mislead like the others as you start to do like this little group.
In all my years of role-playing, I have never once known a group to find a puzzle or an investigation as easy as it was designed to be.
And I think
because what's obvious to the writer is never obvious to anyone else.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Like,
that's the point, isn't it? Yeah.
We always, when we write things, we always lose track of how incredibly solipsistic we all are.
I think that's it, really. And for me, there was a bit of a compounded issue in that I don't tend to run games with puzzles in them very often. I kind of realized this afterwards, is that puzzles are often an element of dungeon design, specifically for dungeons. I remember I was trying to think back to the last time we had puzzles in my home group, and it was when we used to play Dungeons and Dragons, which we haven't played in a long time. And I've never ever run Dungeons and Dragons because I've never liked it. Every time it was my turn to GM, I was always trying different games, and they were much heavier on like exploration or intrigue or urban type of stuff. And you just don't get puzzles in those type of things, right? Puzzles are, how do you get to the next room because it's locked? And it's like, well, that doesn't really apply to anything other than like an old trapped ruin type of thing. So for me as well, I think that was part of it, is maybe trying to give you some... I was kind of feeling like maybe I should have been giving you some sort of tips or clues, maybe, of some description about how to make it work, but yeah. And again, for me, it was just kind of like, oh, why isn't this going quicker? Again, because I'd read it and I knew the solution straight away, obviously. But yeah.
Yeah.
To your credit, you did though. Like when I had my crazy idea of like going up and blowing in this thing's face, like you're talking about it making this hollow sound as it goes to the head, right? Like that's a really good indication of what this was actually all about.
Yeah, we were just about to get there when we started getting mocked.
Yeah.
I think when Eric went for that, that's when we were like, I don't know about anybody else actually, but I was quite sure that like we'd figured it out at that point. We're like, right, yes, all we. In fact, did Ed not even just say, okay, let's just sing the missing note?
I think I had said that.
I forget who it was.
Perhaps
it was you.
started.
I'm sorry if it was.
No, it's fine. I mean,
but yeah, like it just like it definitely came up in our brainstorming.
Yeah.
And then Fancy Pants wanders in and just spoils it all.
Fenhor makes a point as well of saying that he doesn't like having riddles because the game can get stuck, and I think that I can see that definitely being the case.
I think we've proved that.
I had I wrote something recently where there's an NPC that comes and asks a riddle of the players, but there's no solving it. Like it's just insane, and that's the challenge: is realizing that this thing is insane. And how are you going to socially deal with the situation? So yeah.
That's very cruel.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ultimate red herring.
Yeah.
The
puzzle is you've got to realize you're worth more. You and your time are worth more than spending all your time figuring out this bizarre nonsense.
That is genius campaign
That is what
prep.
it feels like to turn 32.
That's a campaign prep everyone needs to do, is come up with one or two insane NPCs who have a riddle attached to them in case you don't have any prep for the session. Just drop them in.
Yeah.
That'll waste a session.
It didn't take them that long before they were like, let's just leave. Like,
Fuck this guy.
Yeah. Why are we doing this?
I think riddles are kind of an interesting thing, or puzzles. I mean, they go back to, you look at Tolkien, you look at Lord of the Rings, and The Hobbit. You've got riddles in The Hobbit, right? With Gollum. And in the Fellowship of the Ring, they have the puzzle to get into Moria, the Mines of Moria, where it's the speak, friend, and enter thing. And it kind of seems to me like that's why you get a lot of them, is because there's a tradition of it in, I mean, the Lord of the Rings has such a huge influence.
Anglo-Saxon poetry.
Yeah, and it does. I guess it does work. People enjoy it and stuff. And I'm sure there are lots of interesting puzzles and stuff. Yeah, but it is a bit of an odd duck for me. I don't know if I would come out saying that I enjoyed that session with the puzzle solving as a GM. I don't know if it makes me want to. I'm not sure it makes me want to run more puzzles necessarily.
I'm so glad that I could just resort to violence to solve my problems. Because honestly, I think we were all very ready for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think we were. At the same time, I mean, I enjoyed the whole experience, so I don't know.
I mean, I had fun.
It led to an interesting problem.
For me personally, it was bordering on not being fun.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know. I kind of like the frustration of it from the characters as much as the players, and how that came through. I don't know. I guess the end result was worth it for me, maybe. But yeah.
Yeah, I think Charlotte as a player was getting a bit frustrated with it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Ed didn't. I mean, I don't want to speak from because I'm not here, but from my perspective, watching you all like interacting with it, Ed didn't seem kind of unfazed by it a little bit, and was just kind of going with the flow a little bit. Charlotte seemed to be getting a little bit annoyed with it, and Harry, you did also were getting a little bit frustrated. But anyway, you've mentioned like resorting to violence. We've talked about it a little bit. So that's the other main thing I wanted to talk about was the duel, because we actually got to use the duel cards for the first time. And for me as a GM, this is the first time I've ever used them ever with Forbidden Lands as well. So it was quite interesting to have actually had that opportunity. What are your thoughts? Actually, I'm glad, Harry, that you've made it today, because obviously you were the one.
Because it'd be harder to discuss this without me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on it? How did you feel it went?
I had fun because I won.
Okay.
And if I hadn't won, I wouldn't have had fun.
Okay. All right.
Because I'm a sore loser. But also because it would then have not been unlocking the puzzle or helping anything it would have just been a pointless waste of time. If it didn't have a result, then it was nothing. It was just a waste of time without a result. But since it had a result, it worked out in our favor, and then it felt like it was worth something.
But what was the result of the duel?
He told us the thing. He confirmed that what we thought we were going to do was the right thing to do with the puzzle.
No, he didn't.
Yeah.
Did he?
Yeah.
Or
You beat him to like being unconscious. Oh yeah, she got fed up. Then was like, this is basically. Yeah.
So since something came of it, it felt like it was worthwhile.
Okay.
But if nothing had come from it, then I'd be like, well, what the fuck was any of this for?
But like,
And
I think
I was frustrated only a little in person, but more in character. And in character, it was the obvious thing to do was, oh, this guy's come to make fun and mouth off at us when we're just doing our best to solve their pointless puzzle. Oh, well, fuck this guy in particular.
So
I think the question is like, resolution-wise as a system.
Yeah, like
Right.
the dual system itself. Yeah. With the
I
cards.
felt like perhaps any move other than attack followed by attack is underpowered.
Yeah, and Fenhorn's making a point here where we did that incorrectly as well. You're not supposed to be able to attack twice in a row, because you can't do that. You can't do that normally, right? Even though I think it's written down as like a fast action on the. I'm gonna grab my books.
I think the only attack that's a fast action is a grapple attack.
But I think on the cards, I've got the cards right in front of me. I think on the
okay.
cards they say fast attack, which is why I kind of went with it in the heat of the moment. Now it says attack slow action. So yeah, we shouldn't have been allowing that.
Oh well.
Yeah, so because you can take one fast and one slow action on your turn. So yeah, it's not actually 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So yeah, anyway, so I think you would have it would have been a little bit more varied if I would have realized that, and I would have kind of enforced that a little bit more, because you wouldn't have been able to do 2 attacks in a row. There are talents which help you when it comes to doing duels. For example, Fenhorn mentions that there's a talent that allows you to attack twice. I know there are definitely talents that allow you to like look at some of the opponent's actions, so you can kind of predict what they're about to do, which can also really help you to be quite effective at duels, stuff like that. So
I like the mechanic with the drawing of cards with numbers to determine the order in which people would go.
Yeah,
I thought that was nice.
I mean that's normal anyway. That's how we do it every time we do initiative.
And then the feint action was trying to swap those.
Yeah, that was the weird one. Feint was a very strange one to have here. In fact, I wanted to talk about that. Thank you for mentioning it. Because Feint is under the maneuver card, where it says you exchange initiative cards with an opponent, right?
Yep.
But in a duel where there's just the two of you, it's useless, because you're like holding your cards up like, these are my 2 cards, show them at the same time. It's like, what difference? Like, who cares what order you're going in?
Yeah, I think you would have to have multiple combatants and using the cards.
Indeed.
for
That's
it
when
to
that's
matter.
when that becomes more important, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's still, it did come up, and I remember thinking like, okay, you can do the feint action, you use the feint action, and I was like, oh, what does it actually do in effect here? Nothing. Yeah. So, okay. For me, I think I was more concerned about how we were going to do it on a virtual tabletop, with me being the only one having access to the cards, and with me actually holding up my 2 cards like this and saying, this is my first one, this is my second one, and then showing it to you, is kind of worked quite well. It was a bit quicker than doing it any other way, I think. I didn't have to faff around with, importing like JPEGs and flipping cards in a virtual tabletop, anything like that.
Benefits of video technology.
Yeah, and I think that's the way I would continue to run it as well. And for me, other than the feint action, I thought it was interesting. The one issue I have with the duels is that it's very much slowing the thing down and focusing on one player, and I'm aware that could get boring for the other players depending on how long it takes to resolve.
I think if there was a duel every session, it would be definitely too much spotlight on one player. If one player
If everyone was doing
focusing on
different
being
ones.
a duelist,
Yeah.
then I think you'd have a lot of problems with making sure everyone got enough screen time.
Yeah.
I was just I enjoyed being able to yell at him, but I was disappointed with myself in the moment for not actually coming up with something great to say.
Yeah. So I don't know. The whole advanced combat with the cards, it's only meant to be used for like big combats, set piece combats with one main like bad guy kind of thing. Or in this case, a small duel with someone else where the stakes weren't that high necessarily. Like you weren't meant to be like butchering this guy. It was more a case of is kind of an ally who's wanted to duel with you. For me, it was a nice way to introduce the mechanics as well. So there's like our first combat, which was with the Saurians around that lake. We kind of introduced this advanced combat with something where the stakes weren't necessarily as high. But yeah, I think
it's really interesting. I think that sort of kind of like you do in Mithras, so you could use the similar system to have it such that at the beginning of a round, right, like you have your possible actions, just write down on a slip of paper what your two actions are, and then like you go through and have two phases, right? Your first phase, everyone decides what they're doing, and then you have your second phase, right? You resolve, and then your second phase. And you could do it in exactly the same way with the same system.
How would you do that with a virtual tabletop?
What's that?
Virtual tabletop version of that. Sounds like it wouldn't be quite as neat.
it wouldn't be that hard to do. So on the virtual tabletop, I have like a numbered which round we're in, and I have like a little mini like token to indicate which round we're in, and I just add a second one and be like, just move one token at a time to say like this is the first set of actions for this round. After everyone's resolved it, we'll go through again and do the second action. And it's just basically when your turn, the way it works in Mithras is that you have action points, and you have different numbers of action points, and every action you do just takes one action point, right? I use the term action point. People who've played Coriolis might be familiar with action points in a different way there.
Right.
But in Mithras, it's basically you can do one thing when your turn comes up, and then you have to wait until the round cycles back and does the next like phase, and then you can do a second one, and it keeps cycling back until everyone has taken all of their actions, because people have different numbers of actions they can take, and that way people who are good at combat, who are very agile and stuff like that, they might be able to act 4 or 5 times in a round, but they're still acting simultaneously each time that phase comes around. And that feels I've played Mithras with you, Eric, actually, and I loved it. Like it's slow. It takes a long time to resolve a combat, but it's nice and deadly, which is nice. But it feels the most like real-time combat that I imagine any kind of role-playing game that slows it down could.
I really must take a look then.
Yeah, it's not quick at all. But I think if you're playing the game, or if you're running the game for somebody and you wanted to have a combat, my recommendation as a GM would be, don't have a big massive encounter where there's lots of people acting, because you'd spend an entire session doing it. But it would be a very different type of session than a typical D&D encounter, where it's analysis paralysis and people trying to come up with the most optimum power to use on their turn, which is ridiculously slow. It's this very different type of slow. It's constantly moving and you're constantly cycling back, and it feels really cool. But anyway, yeah.
What game would you say would be a good example of a game which made things seem more simultaneous?
That one.
But was not so slow as Mithras.
I don't know how you could do that without it being slow. Maybe people know of some options out there, but as far as I'm like, There are plenty of games that don't have initiative at all. Everyone acts at the same time, and you resolve it within the fiction in terms of who goes when. There are plenty of games that do that, and it's basically still round by round, but it's all like you say what you're going to do, and you declare it all at the same time up front, and then you resolve it simultaneously. Plenty of games do that. There are games that try and resolve everything in a single roll as well, which is like Blades in the Dark. Which can feel a little bit also like real time as well. At least my experience of it, it felt kind of like because there's no initiative, it's all handled in the fiction. That's kind of the best way to do it, I think. But if you do want to have it in a bit more of a structured manner, then I think Mithras is probably the best, at least from what I've seen.
It really sounds like it's the only choice.
I'm sure there are other ones out there. I remember we've had this discussion on the Mud and Blood Discord where people were mentioning games I've heard of but are a little bit more obscure, like oh god, I can't remember. Iron something. I remember somebody mentioning there's some games that have some very, very crunchy combat that feel very, very real time, simultaneous, but they take forever to resolve because of how crunchy they are. I'm trying to remember how Harn, when we ran Harn, that felt also... It was a little bit more traditional, I guess. It didn't have the simultaneous stuff. It was more to do with wounds, I think. That was its kind of... Yeah.
Right.
Anyway. So yeah, this felt like a little bit of a kind of trying to get that simultaneous feel, but it's also doesn't tie into normal combat. You've definitely got to use it separately. It should only come into play for big set pieces, which has been confirmed by the designers on the forums, for example. They've said that it's not meant to be used every combat.
No. It would be devastating. You just never get around to doing it, I think.
Well, you'd also have to have these mini duels for all the different all the different groups of people who are attacking, right? So
yeah.
I mean, it would be slow and hard to manage, I think. You all right?
Just my bloody light fell off.
Okay. I'm just having a quick look at the chat. And Fenhorn's saying in the alpha and beta they did try and use advanced combat almost every combat. And now in their real campaign they're barely using it. Or rarely using it.
Yeah.
And Doctor Who, Fenhorn's mentioning the initiative system in Doctor Who. But it only really fits with Doctor Who. I don't know. I like Mithras is really good. I really like Mithras, the way they do combat. But again, I don't think I would. I don't like it enough that I would port it over to any games. The games I'm currently writing. I did toy with the idea, but I tend to go for lighter crunch these days, and Mithras isn't really lighter crunch. It's complex. It adds complexity,
like it. No.
And it slows things down. And the trade-off is it is fun. It is fun to do combat like that because it is quite. It is quite interactive.
It means that you're not sitting around forever waiting for your turn if you're the last one going, and then, you've got a whole bunch of other things to wait through until you get to yours.
Yeah, and only doing the one thing
would be very valuable.
And this is the other thing. Like most games, traditionally you can do two things, right? You can look at Forbidden Lands is very typical, where you have a fast and slow actions, and you can do one fast and one slow, or two fast. And lots of games have like maneuvers and actions where you can do two maneuvers, or you can do this, like looking at Warhammer, for example. And anyway, lots of games have this where you can do like one movement and one action. And it does kind of make it feel like things are a bit disjointed, because you get people who are like, I'm going to move up to this bit and then I'm going to attack. And it's like, yeah, but if you're running up to somebody, they, maybe they're attacking you at the same time. Like, how does that work?
Oh, God,
it just doesn't feel that realistic necessarily.
That's something that's absolutely killing me in my home game of Pathfinder. Just like, come on, can I not just get to do his head in at the same time? But no.
What are you saying, Eric?
I was just gonna say, I mean, there's really no reason you couldn't say. I mean, you could do that with Forbidden Lands as it's written, or Coriolis, right? Like, where you have like your action points, and just go through and say, what are you doing in this phase? And it takes a slow action or fast action, or it takes one action point or two action points. So that's deducted from your rounds total, and you go through until everyone's out of actions and action points or whatever.
Yeah.
So you could do that here. I mean, as the cards show, I mean, that's kind of what they're doing.
I think you definitely could do it in Forbidden Lands and just say you can take one action. It doesn't matter if it's fast or slow. We'll do it one at a time. Maybe we'll try that actually in
I'd be up for trying that.
in something.
Sounds...
It would slow it down a bit, but I think that might be kind of fun.
I mean, a little slower for more fun might be nice.
Yeah. One place that wouldn't work
at
necessarily.
present, it feels very fast, so that's not a bad thing. I think there's room to slow it down a little.
We can try it. I'm happy to try it out because that is, like Eric, as you said, does feel a little bit like you're not breaking the rules necessarily to try it out.
I can't think. I mean, maybe there's some talent where it's not compatible, but I can't think of anything right off.
No,
How
I
many
don't.
talents do you have to rewrite before you just have to make your own game?
I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Damn.
But yeah, anyway. Where you mentioned Coriolis, I don't think it would work in Coriolis because Coriolis has some actions which take like your 3 action points.
But that's it. Then you're done. That first phase, you've used all your action points, and you're done.
Yeah, but for me, I'd almost feel like that should be the last thing that you do. Like you're building up to that because it's like an aimed shot, right? You shouldn't be able to get your aimed shot off in at the very beginning. It should be you're aiming, and then you shoot, kind of. But anyway, we're not solving.
I'm not saying
Coriolis.
it would be perfect. I'm just saying you could.
Yeah, but I think it'd be easy enough to think about it and come up with a solution.
I think we could probably solve that if we wanted it.
Yeah.
But you're right. That now's not the
time. Cool. All right. Were there any questions from anybody in the chat for us on this session? Otherwise, we can slowly start thinking about moving on to the next Tavern Talk.
Packing it in.
I'll need about 5 minutes or a couple of minutes at least to swap the... we're going to close this video down. I need to open the new one, get the Zoom calls changed over and all the rest of it too. So we will need to change, end a little bit early, but... So Fenhorn's just written, as long as everyone knows the system, it flows. In the test gaming, we used cards for huge combat sometimes. It was slower, of course, but it flows because everyone knows the combat system. This is the whole thing where it comes to system mastery, right? And we're in a weird position here where because we only play once a month, and sometimes we only play every other month, it doesn't mean that we retain a lot of system mastery.
Yeah.
I think for
system
Eric,
mastery, I think, is a goal beyond us at the moment.
Yeah, for 3 of us. So Eric, myself, and Ed, we've all run this game before. So we kind of know the rules better than you, Harry, or Charlotte. But certainly, like in Vaesen, it's the same. Where, like I've read through the book once. Nobody else has other than Eric. So Eric is our kind of our guy, and it feels a little bit like we're trying to remember how to play a little bit every time we play. But
in my experience of like most games that I've played with most people, not a single one of them ever will achieve anything that could be remotely called system mastery. I've literally never ever played with anyone who knew off by heart any rule set at all.
You need to play.
But you need to play lighter. You need to play rules lighter games. That's why.
I'm doing
Honestly.
I'm doing a Warlock campaign at home. There's no problem there. They know the rules. Like it's.
Yeah. Tales from the Loop is a good example of a free league product where the rules are pretty easy to get to grasp. Also, Merkborg as a kind of a free league product, piece of piss. Like really easy to learn the rules for that.
Yeah,
but that's
easy.
true of like lightweight OSR, I guess, in general.
Yeah.
Number of players I've had who've just been like, yeah, I was having so much fun, but then you wanted to play something different after 3 months, so I didn't feel like learning a whole new system. Like I'm not asking you to learn the whole new system. I'm asking you to roll 2d10 when I tell you to.
Yeah.
But
I think
I perhaps we are a self-selecting group of surprisingly hardcore gamers, and the average person is not remotely interested.
Oh, that's true of a lot of people, though. I think there's a lot of people who feel as players that it's up to the GM to educate the rules and to remind everyone of what they're meant to do, because they're the ones also are biting, like sitting there saying you can or can't do that. So they're the ones who should have the rules knowledge. And I mean, I'm the same way. Like when we play Dungeons and Dragons, I'm like, I have no desire to read the Dungeons and Dragons rule book. I have a copy of the Player's Handbook. I've skimmed it for character creation and nothing else, because I couldn't care less. It's like I will know what my character's all about and what I can do on my turn, but otherwise I want the DM to tell me what, like, to understand the rules. But I'm a little bit
better,
different, maybe in
yeah.
that I'm reluctantly playing that game just because it's my home group and I love them and I want to play with them, but I don't have zero desire to play that game. Whereas with other games, I'll definitely make it more of an effort to learn rules. But there are plenty of people like that in my home group as well. Like they're like when I'm bringing a game to the table, I will share a PDF of the like a rule summary, or I'll put together a rule summary. And most of the time, there's one, maybe two of my players I know will read through that. The rest of them are like, I didn't have any time, so let's just go.
Yeah.
That's normal, I think.
I mean, I think
Yes,
there's an
that's my
ideal
point.
too, where the players should just be like, I want to do this thing that seems cool and character appropriate, and then you translate that to the rules, right? And
Yes.
ideally, they shouldn't have to know them.
No, I
Yes.
agree. I agree.
Yeah.
So relying on people just knowing things is a mostly not reasonable goal.
Yep. And their game's
think,
designed
yeah.
to take that out of the way. Rodders in chat has just mentioned Powered by the Apocalypse,
Yeah.
which has playbooks, and the playbooks have basically the rules that you need on your character sheet.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely a way of handling it. There are definitely games that's a big design goal, is to make it so that people know what their options are on their
Yeah.
character sheet. So you have like a mix of a play aid and a character sheet in one thing.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Go on.
There are different sorts of games, right? And I think that's what that comes down to. Like sometimes, yeah, it matters.
Yeah.
The mechanics are, and in that case, yeah, it's good to have it all kind of there on your sheet, and you strategize or.
I think that's a good thing to point out, is that it's good to have a character sheet / reminder.
Yeah. Definitely.
Certainly I found that tremendously useful when we were playing Cult,
Yeah.
because I'd never played a Powered by the Apocalypse game before.
Cult's a little bit different, because there's a huge list of things like advantages and disadvantages and one other type of thing you can take, and you can pick any type of them you want for any type of character. So you kind of have to put them in yourself. And we were using a Google Sheets thing where we put notes in to have all that stuff in. But if you're playing it at the table, it'd be a lot different. Anyway, they've produced cards now with all the advantages and disadvantages on them, so you could do it that way. But anyway, right, we're gonna stop now, I think, because I need to swap the feeds over. So thanks everyone for watching, and people who are live, if you wanna hang around. It should take us only about 5 minutes to get everything sorted and back up and running for our next Tavern Talk, which is going to be about Vaesen, episode 4 of Vaesen. So yeah, thanks both of you, Eric and Harry, for joining tonight, taking the time.
Matt, for all
Good night,
you do.
everybody.
Yeah, and we'll catch you next time.